Hi, Neil. I think we just jump right in and talk about tariffs.
Of course.
So,
Happy Small Business
Yes.
Month, by the way. This is one of my favorite events of the year. I just had to get that on the record.
thank you. Can you just, before we talk about tariff policy and what's happening, just to set the playing field, to level the playing field, can you just talk, what really is a tariff?
Well, it's a tax, and in this instance, it's a tax that is paid when you bring a good, occasionally a service, but let's, for simplicity's sake, keep it to goods, when you bring a good into the country. And so if you're importing an auto part, an avocado, kind of anything in between, governments sometimes collect taxes on those goods, and it's usually defined as a percent of the value of the good. Sometimes things come in tariff-free, and so, for example, we have free trade agreements with our friends in Canada and Mexico and Australia, and in normal times, things that you would buy from there would come in without any taxes applied to them. And then there are some goods that, just for the good of society, most of the world has said we shouldn't tax, and that includes a lot of food and a lot of medicines, for example.
Okay. So now we're facing the possibility of tariffs, large tariffs from many countries on many products. So can you tell us first of all, what the potential is, where we are and where we think tariffs will land?
Yeah. So we have several different types of tariffs that have been put in place today. Let's start with the one that's easiest to understand. It's a 10% global tariff. President Trump announced this on April 2nd. And so for anything that you import from countries around the world, small asterisk around Canada and Mexico, a couple special rules for them, anything you bring in, 10% tax on the value of that good. Then we have some other tariffs that are particular to products. So for example, right now we have a 25% tariff on autos and auto parts coming into the United States, a 25% tax on steel and aluminum. And that includes both like raw bars of aluminum that maybe if you're a manufacturer you would use to build something, but also things that have been manufactured into parts that would come in from somewhere else. There are a number of other of what we call sectoral tariffs, like autos and steel and aluminum that are on the horizon. That includes for lumber, for heavy-duty trucks, a tariff on pharmaceuticals, one that's been proposed on semiconductors, and so we're not quite done yet with those sectoral tariffs. And then lastly, we have some elevated tariffs that are specific to particular countries. And so think most notably of China. And so in the first Trump administration, there were some new tariffs imposed on China. Those were kept largely by the Biden administration. Those have been dramatically increased today by the second Trump administration. And so we have baseline tariffs of 145%. That's not a misstatement, 145%. So something that is valued at $100, the tax is $145 on it. That applies to everything coming in from China. And then we have, on top of that, some product-specific tariffs.
So to clarify, some of these are proposed tariffs. They haven't happened yet?
So the ones that are in effect now, 10% on everything, 25% steel, aluminum, auto parts, 145% plus on China, and then on Canada and Mexico, two countries that we have trade agreements with, our biggest trading partners. Lots of things go across the borders. On about a third of all the things we bring in from Canada and Mexico, there's also a 25% tariff.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about how tariffs are impacting small business.
Yeah, this is one of the things that concerns us the most at the Chamber. So if you're a really large business, for example, and you saw these tariffs coming, you might have had the leverage and the financial wherewithal to actually import a lot of stuff to create inventory ahead of those tariffs coming. And we've actually seen a lot of big businesses do that. Small businesses generally don't have that option. And so one is that small businesses really are paying these tariffs and are impacting them in real time as they operate. They often don't have the cash balances or reserves to be able to just simply eat that increased cost of tariff. So they're counting on the ability to pass that cost along to their customers. Well, of course, sometimes it's really hard to pass that cost along to your customers. Sometimes the customers won't buy at that price. There have been some devastating stories, by the way, of small businesses, and this is a normal small business tactic. Wedding dresses, for example. A lot of wedding dresses are sewn, manufactured, China, Vietnam, Cambodia. We want every bride to look beautiful on her big day. You generally order those months and months in advance, every bride knows, and you will generally pay and agree to the price for that up front. So imagine you're a small bridal shop owner. We were just talking to one in Pennsylvania. You're a small bridal shop owner. You've sold those dresses. You've agreed on the price. When you sold that dress, these tariffs weren't in place. Now when you take delivery of that dress, that tariff is in place, but you've already quoted the price. So what happens? Well, you're stuck paying that bill, and in many cases that's bigger than what you were actually going to make on that sale to begin with. So these really hit small businesses in ways that go well beyond how big businesses are impacted.
I think you told me a number before, that it was something like $9,000 per second.
So if you take up so small businesses actually import a lot of things. There are about 235,000 small businesses who are themselves importers every year. And they actually import a third, 32%, of the total value of all the things that America imports. And so if you take that 1/3 and you apply the 10% or the 25% or the 145% to it, and you said, well, the businesses would just keep importing, that works out to a tax bill that's $9,000 a second, every minute of every hour of every day for a full year.
And we had a number, like how many actual small business importers there are?
A little over 235,000.
Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, about 40,000 of those are manufacturers. So these are people who actually are building things in America, but they need a raw material or a particular part that they import. And so these are the people, we want to build things in America. But if you're buying one part to make something in America, and all of a sudden that's gone up 10%, 25%, 100% in price, that's really hard.
So let's be very specific about what the Chamber's position on tariffs is. I'm hoping you're going to summarize it for me.
Yeah, very quickly. In general, we want to see tariffs go away, and we would like to see barriers to trade go away. We believe that Americans really can outcompete basically anyone in the world. We are hopeful that the administration is going to take this moment to negotiate some agreements with other countries to lower the tariffs or get rid of them and reduce non-tariff barriers, restrictions on trade. But the point we made to the administration yesterday in a proposal was, that's at best case, that's going to take weeks and months to negotiate these new deals. If you're a small business, you might not have weeks and months to wait. And so let's do something really simple. Let's create an automatic exclusion from tariffs for all small businesses. So if you're a small business, you don't have to pay the tariffs, and then you don't have to worry about them changing. You don't have to worry about when a deal gets cut with South Korea or Vietnam. You can operate your business knowing that you're not going to get stuck all of a sudden with this big tax bill.
So we have an enthusiastic crowd here. And by the way, if you have questions, we're going to let you ask them about tariffs soon. So be thinking about what your questions are. What can this group of people, and I forgot to say hello to everyone watching at home. We're streaming this live to a very large audience. So what can they and this group of people do? What can small businesses do to help the Chamber with this position?
Well, a couple things. First, go to our website, uschamber.com. We are collecting small business stories. I think there's a QR code that Jeanette Jeanette mentioned that you can do that. Two, as you can imagine, we're talking on social media a lot about this. Go to your favorite social media, LinkedIn, X, etc. Search for the U.S. Chamber. Amplify in your networks this proposal. It would both protect small businesses, and by the way, here's another thing it would do. I love coffee, by the way. I drink a lot of coffee. It brings me my energy some days. We are never going to grow coffee in America. We don't have the climate to grow coffee. We import all the coffee that we drink. The tariffs that have been imposed is $1 billion coffee tax. We're not going to suddenly start growing coffee here. So what are we doing? We're raising the prices that you and I pay. If you happen to own a coffee shop, all of a sudden the thing that you sell the most has just gone up in price. I could tell similar stories about bananas and all kinds of other things. So let's just exempt that from taxes and tariffs too. And so we could do a lot of those things and it'd be really helpful to the economy.
I also forgot to say to the audience at home that on the Watch Live page where you're watching right now, if you scroll down, you can also submit your tariff stories as well.
Submit your tariff story, go on social media. If you think this is a good idea, let people know.
Great. So a lot of people confuse tariffs and taxes, and they're two different, they're two different things by definition. So in addition to the tariff situation, yep, we also are facing what you've been talking about with me for a couple of years now, the tax cliff. So what is the tax cliff and what does our audience need to know about that?
Yeah, great question. So when we normally talk about taxes, we're not talking about tariffs because normally we don't have tariffs. And so when we're normally talking about taxes, we're talking about those things that you pay as a small business every quarter and that you have to reconcile every year by April 15th. These are your income taxes. And you'll remember that back at the end of 2017, the first Trump administration and Congress passed a major tax reform. And so, for example, for a small business, the top tax rate, if you're a pass-through small business, went from 39.6% to 29.6%. And that was done through what was called a 20% pass-through deduction. I won't bore you with all the math, but pretty sizable reduction in the taxes that small business pay. We also did other things like making it easier for you to immediately deduct the expenses for the investments that you make in your business, new plants or new equipment or research and development. Those things have begun expiring. And the vast bulk of what was enacted in 2017 expires at the end of this calendar year. So that's the tax cliff that we've been talking about. If Congress did nothing, there would be a $4.5 trillion tax increase on the American people, a lot of that falling on small businesses. So the Trump administration, Republicans in Congress, we're working with them to extend and ideally make permanent those tax reliefs to avoid this tax cliff. But I want to be clear about this. Extending them, making them permanent, just means that you don't have a tax increase at the end of the year. It's not kind of new tax relief that would reduce the taxes that you are currently paying. It's about avoiding a massive tax increase that would otherwise automatically occur. And so I'm confident we're going to get that done. We're not going to have that massive tax increase, at least on small business.
And a little plug for the U.S. Chamber website. We do have a tax calculator there?
We do, yeah. So if you want to know how much this means for you, go pull the front page of your 1040, and we tell you exactly what two lines to plug into our calculator. Don't worry, we don't ask for any other information. You just put the two numbers in, you hit the calculate button, and it'll tell you exactly how much your taxes would go up if we don't get this extended.
Okay, so we're going to do something we've never done before, which is we're going to take a break in the middle of our interview to take some questions because I wanted to make sure we got to all the tariff and tax questions first.
Awesome.
So we have some mic runners. I see Maureen there. Does anyone have any questions about tariffs or taxes for Neil? I see someone over there. Hold on.
Hi, you mentioned earlier about not allowing tariffs to be something that it would be a relief for small business owners. So what would be considered a small business owner? You have some very big companies out there that are under that category. Do you have a dollar amount in mind?
Yeah, our proposal to the administration says let's work to figure that out. I'll tell you what the Department of Commerce, the Federal Department of Commerce, and the data that they track to understand who small business importers are. It's generally the same definition that the SBA, Small Business Administration, uses, which is 500 or fewer employees. And so the truth is we want tariff relief for as many people as possible. This is something that can be worked out, but that's a pretty standard definition for the federal government, and ideally one that would be quick to implement. I think one of the things that we're most focused on is this cannot be a complicated process. Small businesses don't have resources to go out and hire a bunch of lawyers or lobbyists to help navigate this. You don't have the hours in the day to go through 400 pages of how to apply. Let's just make it easy and clean. The federal government knows a definition of small business, 500 or fewer. If that's what we want to use, let's make that, and let's make it automatic. Automatic, so you don't have to do anything or worry about it.
We have another question, Maureen?
Okay, well, you actually answered one of my questions, which was how do you define small business? But I'll add to that, do you think there should be tariffs on businesses with over 500 employees? And if you make that dividing line, wouldn't there be an incentive to keep one's number of employees below 500 by hook or by crook? And I don't have to tell you there are many ways to do that.
Yeah, so to be clear, we don't like the tariffs on businesses that have more than 500 employees either. But the administration has set us on a process where they want to go negotiate these trade deals, right? And if they're successful at that, that's actually going to be really good for America. We're going to remove tariffs, we're going to level the playing field. But of course, if you're trying to negotiate with over 100 countries, like you can't do that in 24 hours, you can't do that in a week. You know, even if it's weeks or months, we're worried about small businesses that might not be able to survive in that meantime. The truth is that big businesses are going to pay some prices here too if they don't have tariff relief, but they'll have a little bit more ability, hopefully, to survive that than a lot of small businesses will. We're really worried, just like we were during COVID, that big businesses might have some wherewithal to survive this, that small businesses just don't have. And so in this moment, maybe we ought to think about how we can best help small businesses, because you guys know, once they go away, the business is closing. It's hard to get it back.
I see someone here in red. I see a few people. Oh, good.
Talking about me? I'm not in red, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
The person with the microphone gets to ask the question. Go ahead.
Very quickly. Tariffs on services.
Yeah.
So service industries, business process outsourcing models, and other things. Will that be affected?
So at the moment, we generally don't have tariffs on services, and they tend to show up in different ways. By the way, America actually sells a lot of services to the rest of the world. If you think about the just ingenuity that we have, the innovation, the technological experience, we are an exporter of services to the rest of the world. And we actually have a trade surplus of about $1 trillion in services. And so what we're really worried about is that other countries, in response to our tariffs on goods, are going to start tariffing, or more likely imposing different taxes or restrictions on American services. And that, of course, would also be really bad, because those services are provided by Americans who are working right here, and of course are our friends and neighbors.
Sorry, I want to ask a quick question. But we do, I mean, I think of service providers as, there are lots of service providers who have to buy supplies and materials to provide their services. So even those companies are affected, right?
Impacted by tariffs, yeah. And so, by the way, even a company that doesn't import, anything itself ends up getting impacted by these tariffs because the other things, the supplies that they need, their customers, they all end up getting impacted. And so the idea that it's just a few people who are negatively impacted, it tends to be that it's pretty widespread.
Yeah. Who else do we have? Hi, Maureen. I see.
Yeah. Gentleman back there.
You had talked about some of the reciprocal tariffs for services. We just don't know if we want to export our products, especially to Europe, for example. There are a number of trade shows going on overseas. We don't know if we're going to be participating in those shows because our products maybe have reciprocal tariffs in that country. What is the Chamber's position on these issues?
Yeah, that's the reason we need to negotiate these deals as quickly as possible so that we're not imposing tariffs and they're not imposing retaliatory tariffs. We are really worried. And so we have a lot of great distinctively American products that we sell around the world and distinctively American services. And listen, we've seen this in Canada, we see it in Europe. Their response is, if you're going to tax the things that we sell you, then we're going to tax the things that you sell us. And so we're worried about that. That's why we need to conclude these agreements quickly, lift these tariffs. But in the meantime, while that's going on, at least hopefully we can make sure we protect small businesses.
Great. We have, and yeah, I'll get to you next.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Rebecca Swaning. I'm local from Frederick, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I'm curious, I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate. Do you think, or maybe this is the Chamber's perspective, that a strategic time-limited tariff combined with some domestic investment incentives could actually help small businesses establish a stronger presence, especially in industries where there's traditionally a lot of foreign competition? Just kind of wondering, is there any upside from your perspective?
Yeah, we think the upside is generally limited to when there's unfair trading practices. And so if you have a foreign country or company that's dumping goods, meaning they're selling them below cost, that's a perfect example of where you want to have tariffs to level the playing field. If that's not occurring, and so we don't have dumping and we don't have those type of subsidies, and you impose a tariff, even temporarily, then you have to ask what happens when that tariff gets removed, right? And so have we distorted in some ways kind of the market and transaction? Have we given people kind of a false kind of sense of hope that the pricing will be different? And by the way, if you think about that, all that means, by the way, is that prices are going to end up being higher, both for consumers and for businesses as consumers. And so, the things that we see happening here are rising prices and more difficulty when you can't pass along those prices for businesses to maintain sales and profits. And at the end of the day, if you're not generating revenue and you don't have a net positive, there's only so long you can operate a business.
I want to give the last question to this very persistent person here.
Just a curious question. As it relates to small businesses and exporting, how are tariffs impacting businesses as far as products in terms of exporting?
Generally in two ways. Here's the interesting thing. The majority of small business exporters are also importers. And why is that? Well, because generally what they're doing is they're making something here that they're selling abroad, but they may get one or two pieces of it or a raw material from somewhere else. And so imagine you're manufacturing a widget out of aluminum, for example. You are going to get that aluminum maybe from Canada, and it's going to come in, and you're going to refine that, turn it into something, and then you're going to sell that around the rest of the world. Okay? You're going to get hit in two ways. First, you're paying 25% more for that aluminum because we've tariffed it coming into the country. And then if other countries have said, in response to America's tariffs, we're going to raise tariffs on American-made widgets, then all of a sudden your ability to sell into that country is much weaker because that tariff has raised the cost for your customer at the end of the day. So a lot of small businesses kind of get squeezed from both directions if you're in manufacturing by these tariffs.
Do you want to take any more on tariffs, or should we talk about the economy in general?
Do we have anyone with an urgent question on tariffs?
Okay.
All right, we'll talk about the economy.
Oh, there's one more urgent question.
There's talk about 500 and 100 employees. I'm concerned about the micro business, the solopreneur to about 10 employees. They don't have the resources that a 500 employee company has. So that's not fair to lump us with those big people. And we need some special consideration as a mom pop place or dentists with one secretary, things like that. The micro business, what are you doing with the micro business to make sure that we don't get left behind?
Well, that's our proposal, right? Our proposal would say, if you're a sole proprietor, if you got 1 employee, if you got 20 employees, you got 250 employees, no tariffs on you. We have to draw the line somewhere. The government has generally drawn the line, and people argue about this all the time, but government has generally drawn the line and said, if you have fewer than 500 employees, you're a small business. Of course, a lot of those are micro businesses. By the way, the majority of those 235,000 small business importers have fewer than 100 or so employees, and so they're much smaller, and so they'll be protected by the proposal that the Chamber's made.
Okay, so we're already over time, but I've always wanted to do a lightning round.
Let's
do you
do
want
it.
to do a lightning round?
Fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, you ready? So just tell us in general, the economy, how's it doing?
The fundamentals of the economy are quite strong. That's why everyone was really optimistic beginning the year. We've encountered some headwinds, largely from these tariffs. You saw the number yesterday. GDP actually contracted slightly. We can turn this around, but if we don't do something to relieve these tariffs, if we don't get the other policy right, I'm worried that we could end up stumbling into a recession.
Okay. Immigration. What's going on?
Well, obviously the president's taken long overdue actions to secure the border. That's good. I don't think anyone largely disagrees that people who've had their day in court and who are criminals, like those people who entered illegally, should go back. The conversation that we haven't gotten to yet that we have to get to is if we're going to make a lot of new things in America, we're going to need more people to help us do that, and that means that we have to have more legal pathways for people to come into the United States. We're already talking to Congress about that. I'm hopeful that that's something that can become a priority later this year.
Okay. Beneficial ownership information report.
Yes.
We've talked about it 10,000 times.
Because it's changed 10,000 times.
I believe it is dead. Is it dead? Is it over with?
If you are a domestic company, by which that means that you created your business and you registered it in one of the states of the United States of America or the District of Columbia, you don't have to file it. If you formed your business in another country and are operating here, you do have to file it. But I think for our audience today, as long as you created your company in America, no beneficial ownership requirement.
Great. AI, just how you feeling about it?
Love AI. Listen, the way we're going to make more things and the way we're going to grow our economy is by becoming more efficient, and AI has the greatest potential to make us more efficient. I am inspired every day by stories about what small businesses are doing with AI, and I tell our big business friends this too. Small businesses are actually out hustling and out innovating big businesses on AI because you're more creative and you're more willing to take chances. So I'm a big fan.
You set me up perfectly for my last question, which is, and take your time, this is not a lightning round question. I want to end us on a high note.
Yeah.
You and I have talked many times about how small businesses are better, in some ways better, they're more adept at being nimble and adapting. Yeah. And this is a time where we need a lot of ability to adapt. So can you talk about that a little bit?
That's exactly right. And so, listen, I think if when we generally get government out of the way, and when you don't have to think about government and figuring out, does the beneficial ownership requirement apply or does it not? Because, by the way, you don't have 100 lawyers helping you figure this out. When you don't have to worry about these tariff things, and you just get to focus on innovating, you don't have the bureaucracy that a lot of big businesses have, and so you move faster and you take more advantage of opportunities. And so the great dynamism of the American economy is that we have all these people every year who take a chance, who start a small business, who fill a need in society, and by the way, keep constantly adapting to filling new needs. And that's what entrepreneurialism is about. It's what small business is about. It's what we try to champion here at the U.S. Chamber. And I couldn't be more excited, even with these headwinds and challenges, to see how small businesses are going to navigate them and come out on top.
Well, Neil, I think let's say thank you to Neil. He always explains everything so perfectly. So thank you.